Hello my friends, now let's go to the front lines updates. The situation in Pokrovsk and Mirnograd looks like that, and let me explain you step by step what is happening, because now I have more details. Well, we know the information from Syrsky personally that idea for Ukrainian army is to attack towards Ryazan and Fedorivka to cut this Russian attack vector of the 51st Russian army in Ryazan. But here we go with the problem, because Russia has more forces than Ukraine. Yeah, if we speak about this particular region, Russia has around 4 brigades, Ukraine 2. Yeah, Russia little dispersed their brigades. They try to attack into 2 directions, towards Krasny Liman and from Novoye Konamichne towards Mirnograd itself. Ukrainian forces are more or less acting in the same direction towards Fedorivka and Ryazan, but the second problem that Russians were capable to create a significant bridgehead in Ryazan. For now, it's hard to get rid of them in this place using even aviation strikes or drone strikes. Also, Russians are pairing more forces, dividing them into 2 main attack vectors. One goes towards Mirnograd direction and the other one towards Vladimirivka. Well, before Russians had multiple of the attack attempts, now they tried to attack Vladimirivka with infantry forces. Simultaneously, Ukraine commands own forces to counterattack towards Ryazan also from Mirnograd, which is very difficult to do because supply connections here, well, those are mainly broken. Well, today there was the report from the Ukrainian military officials that they were capable to deliver extra forces to Mirnograd and exchange some of the Ukrainian soldiers who stayed on their positions for a very long time. Also, wounded personnel was evacuated, but at what scale was it done, it is hard to say. Russians continue to press kind of hard in 2 of those directions, and the chance for Ukrainian army to cut Russian forces in Ryazan, well, it's kind of low still. Simultaneously, Ukraine attacks towards Pokrovsk itself. We're speaking about special military forces of Ukraine, GUR operations, because the helicopter landing operation was conducted in industrial place, not far away from Pokrovsk itself. Nevertheless, Russians almost freely send their forces to Pokrovsk, at least to the southern part of it, and later on they disperse those along the city, or town is better to say. After all, it's not that big compared to, for example, Kupiansk. And from Pokrovsk, Russia attacks into 2 of the directions, one towards Grishina and the other one towards Rivne. In Rivne, Russian forces have already been spotted, which means that Ukrainian forces have just a very tiny little bottleneck to withdraw just in case, but still they have not yet obtained the permission or order for withdrawal. And that complicates a lot the situation for Ukrainian armed forces in Mirnograd and nearby villages. They potentially can be trapped if Ukrainian forces seize the tension from Suvorove, this attack vector, and if Ukraine is not successful here, the probability again is not that much for Ukraine to be successful in Ryazan. Well, it means that Ukrainian army will be trapped. Unfortunately, guys, it's like that. Judging on what is happening, it is pretty much difficult for Ukraine to defend Mirnograd and Pokrovsk, especially if we speak about the Russian forces which already entered Pokrovsk with massive forces. There are hundreds and hundreds of the Russian troops in the southern outskirts, yes, but also in Pokrovsk itself. Now Russia controls 80 up to 90% of the settlement, and the second Russian army is doing this job, and now it's impossible to kick them out with just limited forces Ukrainian army is using. Yes, the GUR special forces, they're very capable, but they're not the gods, they're not star troopers or so on. No, they're also limited, and against the Russian enormous forces which are already in Pokrovsk, well, I think that those counterattack actions will not bring any sort of the profit, which means that the only hope for Ukrainian army is to counterattack towards Ryazan. But again, as I told you, Ukraine has 2 times less forces compared to Russia, just 2 of the brigades versus 4, and according to the standard book, Ukraine should have 12 of the brigades deployed there to conquer Russian advancement. So for me, the success of this operation also looks kind of unrealistic, let's be honest, which means that Ukraine has the only variant is to start the withdrawal of the forces with the active battle. That will, of course, bring some of the losses, maybe even big losses, but it's still better than to be trapped in Mirnograd completely. For now, Syrskyi and Ukrainian command still waits. They think that they could be successful in Suvorove, going to Razane, cutting this Russian attack vector, but at the same time, Russia is advancing every freaking day, especially from Pokrovsk. Let's go to the timeline. It was yesterday and it is today. You see Rivne already partially under occupation. Well, at least Russian sabotage groups were spotted in Rivne, and this bottleneck available is almost not available. There are just two of the crossroads which could be used for evacuation, and they are very, very close to the enemy control areas, or almost under enemy control areas, and obviously Russia uses lots of the drones. That makes any sort of the movements almost not possible. Again, I'm not sure about the success of today's operation of Ukrainian army, as it was reported the successful rotation of the forces in Mirnograd. Well, how was it done? Again, how many forces were exchanged? Because all of them, yeah, it's impossible to exchange already. It's only possible to withdraw with losses, unfortunately, guys. And about Russia, how they send their troops to Pokrovsk, well, let me show you some of the video. So you can see the transport. This is probably a motorcycle, but anyways, Russians were spotted over here in Pokrovsk already, riding motorcycle, not being hit by any sort of the drone, so which means they freely may send their forces to the southern part of Pokrovsk and later on operate within this settlement. So for now, basically they may send any sort of the number of the forces, thousands of the troops, quite easily, so their supply lines are not being controlled by Ukraine any longer, and that makes the liberation of Pokrovsk impossible, and even the part of the town it's very difficult to defend. And here's one more proof that Russians are freely advancing towards Pokrovsk. Lots of the infantry on motorcycles. You may see the weather, it's kind of foggy out there. Let's watch this video. So you may see, lots of the Russian forces, and it's just a single small group. Fog, Ukrainian drones cannot hit them, and they go right into the settlement. They're taking buildings, and for the faster advancements, they're using motorcycles and those kind of the vehicles with the flat tires, I guess, but still they can move and they run with all of the forces available. That's the Mad Max army, but in a way it is successful. So, of course, right now I would suggest the Ukrainian command to withdraw the forces from Mirnograd, from all of those settlements, including Pokrovsk, using those poor visibility conditions. Otherwise, it could be very late for Ukrainian armed forces, which are deployed in Mirnograd. And of course, if they are captured, encircled, it will demoralize the entire Ukrainian army and entire Ukrainian population. As for me, if Russia sends everything of that just like that freely, the destiny of Pokrovsk and Mirnograd is already decided. Well, if you go to Rodinske, there Ukraine is still operating, I would say also more or less freely. Russians tried to enter Rodinske multiple of the times, but were not successful. And if they create their bridgehead here, well, it's the end for this entire group, including Pokrovsk. That's why Rodinske is so important, and Russians are unable to advance that fast from the Krasny Liman just because of Rodinske. And I guess today Ukraine operated there even with tank. Yeah, here's the video of the Ukrainian T-64 tank that was working on some of the buildings. Russian troops tried to enter those buildings and use those as the bridgeheads for the further advancements. This is the place where the tank was spotted, the southern part of Rodenske, before Russians already entered this area. General Commander Syrski also reported that Russia sent extra 150,000 soldiers to Donbass, Ukrainian territory of Donbass. The idea for Russia, he mentioned, not just the occupation of Pokrovsk and Mirnograd with those troops, but also they want to occupy the entire region. So this operation of Russia may last for entire year with lots of the convoys of the vehicles and what we saw basically in 2023, at the beginning of 2024. If Russia sends 150,000 troops, it means that they think that they will lose those during this battle. Well, first of all, Russia will occupy Pokrovsk and Mirnograd. It's already evident, and Russia simply doesn't need 150,000 troops to do so. Even with the current forces, they're pretty much okay. I hope not to encircle Mirnograd and other settlements here, I mean small villages, but just to force Ukrainian troops to leave Mirnograd. Second, they're gonna advance towards Konstantinivka. They already presented in the southern outskirts of the city, and they'll try also to go from Chasiv Yar to Konstantinivka too. Simultaneously, Russia wants to get to the previous positions in Dobropilya direction, also advancing to Dobropilya itself. The idea here is to bypass and try to encircle at least the part of this big agglomeration of the settlements, including Kramatorsk. In Liman, Russia will try to advance from multiple of the vectors. Actually, the gray zone is very close to Liman. Russians before cut supplies for Liman, so it's very difficult for Ukraine to get something into those positions. Ukraine will be forced to leave Liman, I would say, at the beginning of the next year. And advancing from Siversk, well, Russia had some of the success there. They fully occupied Sreblansky Forest. The fight for it was ongoing for 2 years, and now they want to advance towards Slaviansk from this direction. Well, because of the difficult terrain, I would put it under the Great Dump. And what is most important, Russians cannot go to Slaviansk from northern side because, again, they cut all of the supplies, all of the bridges, and the river there is kind of wide to cross it for any sort of the tanks, armored vehicles, so just some infantry, small groups may do it. But even for infantry, this task is very, very difficult. So I think that for the coming year, Russia will not be successful, at least with this northern part of agglomeration, but they will be successful for sure with Mirnograd, with Konstantinivka, and maybe with this attack vector towards Drushkivka, and yeah, also with Liman. So unfortunately, if Russia is really unlimited with its army men, and 150,000, that's quite a lot of the army men, well, in this case, they can take pretty much a lot of the ground, and for Ukraine it will be really difficult. The idea for Putin is to occupy Donbass and later on present some sort of the ultimatum for Ukraine to surrender something, sovereignty, to call for elections, to put his puppet government in Ukraine. There will be some sort of this attempt, and if Ukraine disagrees, Putin may announce a massive mobilization, because in that case he would lose the great part of his army in the battle for Donbass, and he would need more army men to go further to Dnipro, to Kharkiv, and further to Poltava, and maybe start a new special military operation towards Kiev. I think that's the plan for the Russian dictator for the coming years. But for the main battlefield here in Donbass, he plans to succeed the next year. And simultaneously, Russia is pressing towards Zaporizhia. Why? Simply because they're successful. Their Ukrainian defense is kind of weak. As you see, every day Russia propels and takes more territories. I would say that if Russian commanders were smarter than they are, they would deploy the main part of their forces not to Pokrovsk and Konstantinivka, but over here to reinforce the attack towards Zaporizhia, because Zaporizhia is, I would say, way, way, way more important than all of those settlements for Ukraine. Why? Simply because in Zaporizhia they can potentially cross this Dnipro river to attack whatever they want to attack over here, including Kryvyi Rih, or they want to go to Dnipro from the southern area. The defense is very weak on this part of the shore. Well, anyways, the battle is now ongoing for Mirnograd and Pokrovsk. That's the main hotspot, and I already told you more details about that situation, which I discovered while analyzing the front lines. Also, Russia moved a little in the Kharkiv direction towards Odradne. Well, here is no update, but actually it already happened. Judging on other sources presenting the information, Odradne turned into the Russian-controlled territory. Well, here terrain is way more difficult compared to Donetsk Oblast. Nevertheless, idea for Russian side is to attack Ukraine also from multiple directions here, to advance little by little, and also there is the fight ongoing in Kupiansk. About Kupiansk, Deep State shares the information about Ukrainian drone operation in the area, so Russian forces, they struggle there, but still it is not possible to get rid of the enemy troops just with the help of the drones, so the situation is still very difficult for Ukraine. Well, guys, for now we have those kind of the news from the front line, and I hope that tomorrow I'm gonna see Mirnograd out of Ukrainian forces, and it would be the best case scenario for Ukraine in Pokrovsk, Mirnograd direction. And I just hope that our guys will withdraw with the less or least losses possible. Yeah, I think using the bad weather is good to go decision nowadays, so early morning or maybe at night, it's better to do it, otherwise there could be a big trouble or problem for Ukraine, and as I say to you, in general, for morale of Ukrainian people. Well, guys, thanks for your support on Patreon and on membership of the channel. The Patreon link you may find in the video description just below. As for membership, you may just press join, and that is how you support the job that I do here every day. And today I filmed 3 of the videos. Without your support, it wouldn't be possible. Tomorrow I'm gonna film maybe 2 of the videos. We'll see. If you do not have this opportunity to support me financially, you may just press like to this video and subscribe to the channel. That's how you boost this video in YouTube algorithms. And thank you so much for it as well. I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are, and have a great time.